Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the interview and experience series. So, today we have Vikas on the channel, and Vikas will be sharing his full time software development experience. Vikas is currently working as a software developer in Myntra, and prior to that, he was working with Paytm. And in this video, we will be covering his experience at Paytm. There will be another follow up video with his experience in Myntra. So, first of all, welcome on the channel, Vikas, and thanks for taking out time to share your experience.
Hey, thanks for hosting me, man. It's been pending since a very long time, so finally here we are.
Yes, yes. I mean, it has been really busy for everyone relocating to workplaces and all the things going. So
Right.
yeah, finally. Okay, so our discussion today would be segregated into four sections, and we'll talk about your experience, your projects in the company, your preparation for the interview process and hiring process, and then finally we'll also briefly discuss the interview experience. And as usual, for the timestamps, please check out the description below. You'll find timestamp for each section in the description. Feel free to jump to the relevant sections. So, Vikas, would you like to begin by sharing your experience as a full-time developer at Paytm?
Right. So I got placed in Paytm straight out of college, and in June 2020, we started working as a developer. So the experience was quite a roller coaster over there. In most of the company, like usually the students go through some training program for initial month, but Paytm wasn't like any of them. Like you were straight away put into onto live projects. I still remember my first task that was actually I was work within the first week of my work at Paytm. I was directly working on prod. I was pulling out data from the prod. So that was the thing. They actually don't really wait out for you to get on board, and they are like you just jump into the water and you will learn to swim anyhow. So apart from that, like going forward, one thing that I really like about Paytm was the scale is very huge, and you know your projects actually get shipped in onto prod very soon as you develop them. And while working at Paytm, I was fortunate enough to work across multiple projects. So in the initial 6 months of my experience at Paytm, I had already worked on four major projects that were actually the backbone of the Paytm for Business app. So yeah, I forgot to mention there are actually two main verticals when it comes to Paytm. One is the user facing, that we as a user use it across day to day whenever you want to pay and all. And there's another vertical which is purely for business purposes, which is used by merchants. So I was part of that merchant team where we used to take care and handle the data that come across from the merchant. So I was part of this team called KYB, which is know your business. Just like whenever you get onboarded to any of the services, financial services, you have to get your KYC done, where they take your Aadhaar card and your relevant information. When Just like that, whenever a merchant is onboarded on Paytm, there's he or she has to go through this procedure called KYB, which is know your business, where all the information regarding that particular merchant and whatever business he does is taken into account and it is fed into the system. So I was part of this KYB team, and as the name suggests and as I've given you the description, the scale was very huge. We were managing data of millions of merchants that are actually onboarded onto Paytm. So I worked over there for like a month or so, and after that I was moved in onto a different project, which was called FSM, which is Field Service Management. Field Service Management is basically the project where every every company like Paytm, or be it any e-commerce company, they have certain agents or certain staff that works on the field, be it delivery guys or be it the people who actually go and onboard merchants onto their platform. This FSM used to take care of these people. Like there was another app called Golden Gateway app, which we used to, it was a third party app which we used to manage these people. We used to say give them targets and areas where they had to work. And I worked over there for 2 3 months, and for 2 months actually. And as soon as I completed 3 months, I was moved into this humongous project called document management system. And for the initial 1 or 2 weeks, there was a senior along with me who was guiding me and making sure I get onboarded into this DMS properly. And this was actually a project that was being used by Paytm Payments Bank and the Paytm, the whole across the whole Paytm. It used to have the users' data, the normal users' data, the merchants' data, and the people who were actually onboarded through Paytm Payments Bank. And the same code base was being used across. We had a different database, but the same code base was the code base was same. Now after 2 weeks, the senior software developer who was there, he moved on to a different project, and the whole ownership of this project came onto me. This is another plus point of Paytm. While working in Paytm, you get ownership of very big projects, and you are the one who is taking care of them. So with this comes a sense of pride and sense of ownership as well. And obviously, there are lots and lots of responsibilities while managing these big projects. So I worked on that project for another 3 months, document management system. And post 6 months, I was moved into another very new projects, which was actually we were actually starting it from scratch. Other people, like, it was earlier, it was being handled by other team for the last 2 years. They were trying to bring it up, but somehow they failed. So my manager took this project up, and he was like, we'll start from scratch and we'll try to bring this project up in the next coming 6 months. And he was like, we'll form a team, we'll form a new team, and we'll work on this. So within the first 3 months, we were able to give a UAT to the product managers, and we were able there was a very significant development over there. It was an analytics project where we were supposed to show all the sales data that every merchant makes on during the period of time. And uh, as the project suggests, it's analytics, and there are lots and lots, billions of transactions that happen across Paytm. So yeah, handling that huge database was another challenge. And I was over there, I was again working as a backend developer, developing APIs and dashboards. So within the first 3 months, we were able to launch the uh, product to the mobile platform, which was for the P4B app, Paytm for Business app. And over the next 3 months, we worked on optimizing the data, optimizing the optimizing our APIs and data, and how can we more efficiently show the data, make the websites and the apps faster, load the data faster. And at the end of the 6 months, we had a proper dashboard and a website ready. And yeah, that was actually my stint with Paytm, working across 4 different projects over the period of 1 year. And yeah, it was, as I mentioned initially, it was a totally roller coaster ride.
Thanks a lot, Vikas. That was quite a detailed explanation, but I'm sure it's amazing that you accomplished so much in so less time, and I'm sure the learning curve would have been really steep. As you were saying, there was no proper or set onboarding, and most of the things were learning on the fly, and you had to get uh get down, get your hands dirty, and learn things. So I think you would have actually learned a lot when it comes to software development while you were working on these projects.
Yes, actually, as you mentioned, I was learning on the go. There was any specific time period that was actually allotted to you, but you had to get your hands dirty. You had to directly work on the code, and learning various frameworks, such as we used to use Spring Boot and Spring. There were certain projects that were basically on Spring, and there were certain projects that were on Spring Boot, and you had to work across them. So at times it get confusing, and especially when you're straight out of college, you are. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with these framework, but I was not at that time. So yeah, getting yourself familiarized with them, and especially when you're not a Java developer, I used to code in C++. That was another challenge. But yeah, the thing is, when you work on these kind of projects, it's the learning curve is definitely it's very steep, but at the end of the day, you go to bed like with satisfaction. Yeah, you have learned something, even if you aren't pushing the code to the prod, or you haven't actually raised a PR or anything, but the challenges that you face every day, they teach you something or other. So yeah, there's lots and lots of learning when it comes to these kind of startups. But Paytm is now a whole company, but still there's this startup culture over there, which gives you an immense exposure to tech and your learning experience.
Right. So like you mentioned that even though it's an old company now with the IPO and everything, but still they follow the startup culture, and it seems like the work is really hectic given that you have to learn a lot of things, do a lot of things in a short span of time. So, like, how is the work-life balance according to you, and how is the overall team culture in Paytm?
Yeah, actually, Paytm started as a startup only, so it's really difficult to get rid of those values or that work culture for still. So, the requirements can come from anywhere. If it's you're working properly and you're calm today, you never know what kind of work you'll get tomorrow. So when it comes to the work life balance, at times it was pretty good, but at times it used to really get hectic. So that was this capricious behavior was one of the reason why I chose to leave Paytm. So basically it lacked structure. It lacked structure and management. There were deadlines and there were requirements, and everything in between. There wasn't any structure. You had to fulfill the requirements and meet the deadline. That was the thing. So yeah, this was the kind of work culture they had. And the work life balance, I think it's pretty much the same in every startup. Wherever you go, they are very much go result oriented, as uh, rather than being process oriented. They wanted the product to get shipped to the production as soon as possible. So yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that since you were able to successfully navigate through all this uncertainty, you like not just growing on the technology front, but growing as an individual because you just as a fresher, you have no experience of navigating through all these things, and just going through this process once you learn a lot, develop that all those management skills and everything. So I'm guessing it would have been great
Yeah,
experience for you.
right. As I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, you are always learning something
Yeah,
with the challenges that you face. So it obviously it helps you up in the career that you have ahead. Because once you have faced those kind of difficulty, you go ahead and things seems easier somehow.
okay, so like, so what? So you mentioned that you were working as a backend developer on most of your projects. So what kind of tech stack did you use, and like, what other responsibilities did you take up apart from backend development and apart from breaking the prod every now and then?
Yeah. So yeah, mostly I worked as a backend developer only. So initially we were working on uh, these three projects that I mentioned: the DMS, KYB, and FSM. We were using Spring Boot over there. The Java was the language, chosen language that we used to code in, and therefore for the database purposes we were using this MySQL database, because yeah, MySQL database. And since I mentioned, like, for DMS and KYC, these were very the kind of data that were very critical to people, and they were very PII data, that is personally identifiable information. So those for security purposes, they relied on MySQL databases. And yeah, so apart from, yeah, when I moved to my fourth project, that was analytics project, the data was so huge. We had to create a new document in terms of NoSQL databases. So we relied upon Elasticsearch. Over the database became Elasticsearch, and yeah, so for all the transactions were being stored in Elasticsearch databases. And to improve the performance of the system, we were using caching mechanism which were supported by Redis cache. And yeah, when it comes to, and for from the DevOps side, I didn't really had that much exposure from the DevOps side. But yeah, from every now and then we used to face challenges, so we used to interact with the DevOps. So, and we got to learn every new thing, like why our products are breaking, what mistakes we have done. So there were like CDN networks we used to get to know about, like Akamai and all. And apart from that, we were using Kibana for logging and all.
Right.
So yeah, this was majorly the tech stack that I worked on. But yeah, to wrap it up, it's majorly Java, it's Spring Boot for framework, and then MySQL. And when it comes to caching, it's Redis. Yeah.
Okay, that's really great. And like, if a fresher joins Paytm, like apart from backend development, what other roles or domains a fresher can work in?
So yeah, so when Paytm came to our campus, they were looking for backend developers only. Honestly, at that point of time, I didn't have that much exposure for backend, because over that time I used to work on Android, and I used to do Android development. Uh, so it was pretty much new to me, and I was comfortable getting the, even if I was being assigned a front end development, but over there they were hiring for backend development. But when Paytm goes to any hiring, there's like actually four major roles for which they hire. One is the, as I mentioned, backend development. Second is front end development. Third is DevOps. Fourth is QA. So if you, I personally, I haven't seen anyone during my stint at Paytm who was actually working on both, because in all my projects we had a separate team for front end and we had a separate team for back end, and then we had these QA engineers who were managing both, who were testing the changes and the code for both of the teams. So yeah, these are the rules. Like, and I think it depends upon you. If you get hired as a backend developer, you can talk to your manager and switch into a front end role, and vice versa.
Got it. That's really great. So in conclusion, just the last point I wanted to discuss in our in this section was like, how was the compensation and benefits according to you as compared to other software companies?
Yeah. So yeah. So personally, I felt like when I was hired, the compensation as compared to the industrial standard, they weren't that good. Like, I mean, I expected more, and they they weren't matching my expectations. So initially I was there for an exposure. I was like, okay, let's get an experience, sufficient experience, and once we have that, we'll switch. So but over there, like, yeah, right, and the amount of work that was being given to us, it wasn't like nowhere close, it wasn't justified by the amount of compensation that we were getting. So that was another reason why I switched from Paytm. There wasn't, the compensation wasn't justified. But while I was leaving, when oh, in that year when Paytm hired, it has actually worked upon its compensation, and they were they were providing a decent package, better than the one that I got to the freshers. And yeah, I think they have fairly worked on the compensation part. And given that, like, it's based in Noida and it's around Delhi, those cities are not that expensive as compared to in Bangalore and Hyderabad. So I think that was a fairly good compensation for the new compensation that Paytm is paying. That's a fairly decent compensation that a fresher can get. And also, yeah, talking about this compensation stuff again. So while I was leaving, we had this appraisal cycle going on. So I think by the amount of work and the kind of work that I did, my manager was quite impressed, and he somehow he recommended my profile for getting a normalized compensation. Uh, and I was getting promoted to an SSE within 1 year of work at Paytm. So even though the compensation was being increased and it was getting normalized, and but at that point of time, I didn't feel like it's like by the amount of work that I've done, it was fair enough for me to stay and work with that compensation. So yeah, I chose to be
Yes, that's great. And just in case anyone missed, SSE means senior software engineer,
senior software engineer.
right? So yeah, because I think that was a pretty detailed discussion, and I think we've covered every aspect of your stint at Paytm.
Yeah.
I guess we can move on to our next section. So, moving on to section two, first I would like to ask, are there any so as you said that the company came on campus, so are there any GPA related constraints for people trying to apply, or what are the different ways someone can apply if the company is not coming on campus?
Okay, so while if I remember correctly, the only requirement that the company put forward in during our placement was you should not have any backlogs, and your GPA should be more than six GPA. Yeah, and so this was the only requirement that they put forward. And in case the company is not coming to your campus, fortunately during our time, like it came twice to our campus because yeah, COVID was going on and the hiring people was difficult. Like so, it came twice on a campus, and both of the time the requirements were same. I think even the CGPA requirement was removed the second time that Paytm came to our campus. And in case it is not coming to your campus, you can always reach out to the recruiters on LinkedIn, and yeah, that should be your shot at that.
Okay, so I'll just write it down. Great. So, yeah, coming to the next question, are there any tips on how to prepare resume? So, if someone is trying to reach out to recruiter on LinkedIn, what are the things that would increase your chances of getting an interview call?
Okay, first of all, like you need to be very clear about the role that you want to apply for. In case you are going for a backend development, or you want to apply for a front end developer as a front end developer. So just be very clear about the role that you want to apply for, and accordingly, sort out your projects in your resume and make sure those projects show your strength. That you, if you are applying for a backend developer, make sure that the recruiter gets attracted to the qualities that your projects are showcasing. You have actually worked on certain frameworks, you have actually worked on databases, and you hold a good knowledge, because it's only then they'll consider taking your profile forward. And because from my experience personally, whenever I used to refer people for this especially freshers or even 1 year people who had 1 year of experience for the roles, they very critically analyzed your resume, and they were the conversion rate of a referral into an interview was very less actually.
Okay.
So yeah, make sure that your project reflects that your skills properly. And I don't think there's any bar on CGP or your percentage when you're applying offline. Uh, I'm Yeah, as it always goes, like make sure your projects and your skills compensate for your uh, poor CGPA if that is the case. So yeah, that's it.
That makes a lot of sense. So I think as any other startup, they are looking out for skills and experience more than your GPA. So I guess that's a really great thing you mentioned here. And so once you have reached out to the recruiter and you've got a call or maybe mail for the hiring process, so like before going on to the hiring process, what kind of preparation would you suggest for getting hired? And I mean in terms of subjects, topics, and difficulty level, like what is the absolute bare minimum someone should do?
Okay, so I'll answer this question. Like I've been on both sides of the table. I have given interview and I've taken multiple interviews on Paytm as well. So I'll try to like let you know what are the expectations. So while preparing for Paytm, my preparation involved like brushing up my DSAs. Obviously, every company asks for DSAs. That's the basic thing that you have to get through it. Then I brushed up my OOP concepts, and After that, like DBMS, just have a good grip on SQL queries. Yeah, SQL queries, the ACID properties, and the basic difference between where you will use the SQL database on your NoSQL database, and certain anomalies that DBMS has. So yeah, I think these three things can get you through any interview as a fresher. There were we the Paytm company never even at that time I never had like LLD or anything in my mind, so I never prepared for it. But I think if you have a good command on who, LLD isn't shouldn't be an issue for you. uh, and again, yeah, this was my preparation for Paytm, and coming to what I expected from people when they were being interviewed by me. Again, whatever I was asked in my interview, I had the same expectation. I expected them to solve DSAs, and usually the interview lasts for 40 minutes, and the interviewer's expectation is you are able to solve two questions. One is actually from my perspective. I give them one easy one that he or she should be able to solve within 10 to 15 minutes, and the second one is actually a medium one. For the second one, I don't expect them to write a code. Coming up with a good approach, an optimized approach, is enough for me to judge the person whether he's capable of coming up with logic and developing a logic. I focus more on the approach that the person will have, and how he's able to tackle the uh, s- question, and again how good he is with the corner cases, and is their approach able to handle all the corner cases. And yeah, and if the time allows, I ask them certain follow-up question based on the DSA, or you know oops, or DBMS from DBMS. So yeah, these were the initial rounds that I used to take as an interview.
Got it, got it. So makes sense. So just in conclusion, just be thorough with your DSA, object-oriented programming, DBMS, and in DBMS also, if something is bare minimum, then SQL. But then also, as you mentioned, the other properties like atomic property or understanding the anomalies and everything. So it is good to have a knowledge of those as well.
Right, right.
Got it, got it. Thanks a lot, Vikas, for that quick explanation. And so I guess that covers the second section of our discussion. And moving on to the last section, because would you like to give a brief overview of your interview process?
Sure, sure. I'll go ahead. Let's thoroughly discuss this. So Paytm came to a college in around November, and uh, when I interviewed, so there were like basically, as all company does, there was one online coding round where we were given three questions. Two were fairly easy question. Every one was most of the people were able to solve them. The third one was a hard one, and very I'm not sure like how many people were able to solve them, but I was able to solve it. And post that, everyone who was even able to solve two questions out of the three was shortlisted for the face-to-face interview round. And uh, apart from me, everyone had four rounds, and I only had three rounds. I'm still not sure about the reason for having three rounds, but my best guess is because I was able to solve all of the three questions. That is why. So my first round was a DSA based round, and I was provided with one hard question. It was based on trees, and uh, actually across Paytm, like what I've observed is these people are very obsessed with trees and linked list. So make sure if you're interviewing for Paytm, you have a good grip on these two topics. So yeah, so for the first round, I got a question on based on trees, and once I was and once I gave them my approach, once I explained them the solution, uh, that person actually asked me to write the code on paper. So again, make sure you have a habit of writing the code on paper without an editor, and you write it clean, you keep it clean, you use meaningful variable names, and your syntax is correct. Uh, One thing that I liked about this round was, even though the question was hard and I was trying to come up with an approach, there was and every time I was messing up or not going in the right direction of the approach, the interviewer was nudging me towards the right direction. He always gave me some hints so that I'm always on the right path. So ultimately, I was able to come up with a solution, and then yeah, he asked me to write the code on the paper. Once we were done with that, I think there was 10 minutes left, and in that time he asked me few SQL queries. So yeah, those were also like tricky queries, so make sure like you are able to solve SQL queries. And you, as as I mentioned, skill queries are not only about getting the syntax right and just pulling out the data from the database. It's not always select star. It's you have to use logics, and you have to come up with a better and optimized SQL query. And also, yeah, make sure that you are comfortable using subqueries in your SQL. So once that round was clear, I was pretty confident. Okay, this round went really well, and I'll be called for the second round. And in the second round, I was called. That was actually, it wasn't a DSA round. It was supposed to be a DSA round, but it wasn't. So the interview asked me about mm, OOPS concept, like what is polymorphism and those standard stuff, diamond problem, and how will you solve it, the friend function, and all the concepts that you have, the difficult ones. And yeah, I was able to answer them because for the past few interviews I've been uh, brushing up those concepts. And after that, like for the last half an hour of that round, we discussed about my projects and the things that I've done, the technology I've used, and how I'll be, if I'll be comfortable with the tech stack that they have. And so yeah, by the end of that interview, I was fairly confident I'll be able to make through this Paytm hiring route. And they, at the end of the interview, at the end of the second interview itself, they told me that my next round will be HR round. And I was quite surprised because everyone was having three rounds. And post that, I was called for this HR round. And in HR round there was like the standard stuff, like why I want to join Paytm, then comparing Paytm whether the payment apps and all, and if I am comfortable working from office. At that time, like COVID wasn't an issue, and like they were asking me like what do I think about gaming and all, gaming and apps, because at that time like Paytm was trying its hands on Paytm first games. So over there I was thinking like I might get into this vertical of Paytm, but that wasn't the case. Like I got into Paytm for business apps. So yeah, that was like my three rounds at Paytm. And at the end of the day, like we all were sent back to home. And around 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. we got the final list of the people who are made it, and yeah, I was one of them.
Yeah, must have been a really happy and exciting moment after spending all that time at that
Yeah,
TNP.
right, right. That was a happy sweet. Like finally getting a job, at the end of your 4 years at, especially at DTU.
So I guess that was a pretty detailed, I mean, not pretty detailed, it was a really detailed overview of the whole process. And I guess everyone who's watching this video must have got a real good idea of what is the expectation and how are things done at Paytm, and like what is the interview process. And just in case, I guess that's all from my side. Because would you like to add anything just in case I missed something?
I don't think I have anything left, but in case you are planning to join Paytm, so be sure like there's going to be a lot of work and there's going to be a lot of learning. And I now the offices are open. I hope one thing that I actually miss, or I about Paytm, is I wasn't able to meet my team and work with them in person, like because of the lockdown and stuff. It was towards the end, like I got to meet my team in person once or twice. And it, uh, it was like, but it was a bit emotional because I was leaving, and at that time I'm getting to meet them. But yeah, right now it could be a totally different journey. It's been 1 year since I've left Paytm. So yeah, things could be really different. And howsoever my journey was at Paytm, at the end of the my stint at Paytm, like that was the time where I was actually loving my work, the kind of work that we were getting, regardless of the work culture or the management over there, because you know, the kind of project that I was working on, analytics, it had such a huge user base, and the database were so big, and the kind of challenges that we used to work on, and the people, my we got a new engineering manager. He was so much passionate about the work, and there were few new hires of software as a new hire who were actually senior software engineer. And there was so much learning in the last phase of Paytm. So one thing that I actually really loved about Paytm was you will actually get to see your work live on their apps, because the analytics project that I worked upon, it was actually live on, it's still now it's live on Paytm P4B app, Paytm for Business app. And when you get to see your work being used by millions of users, you actually get the sense of pride and accomplishment. So yeah, if you are looking forward to start your career with Paytm, I think it's a great place to start with.
Yeah, I guess as an engineer, the two most motivating things are impact and ownership. And I guess both of the things were like in abundance in Paytm. So yes, must have been great. Yeah, so I think we can end this video here, and we've covered pretty much everything in detail. So thanks everyone for watching, and stay safe and keep learning.